1, 2, 3, 4.
Alright, so welcome back to It's Not a Sport, Season 3, Episode 5. I know I skipped out on the last 2 weeks. I apologize for that. School hits hard, and when it does, you gotta focus on that, sadly. But that doesn't mean I haven't been keeping up with the news, and we have a lot of really cool kind of news things to go over and a lot of cool talks coming up. So this week's episode, we'll be going over the news, just the small things for the last couple of weeks. And we're going to be talking about the Final Fantasy VII remake, my thoughts on it, my review, and where I scored it. So let's get into esports, like always, and talk about the Overwatch League. So the current standings for the Overwatch League are Philadelphia Fusion are in first, followed by Shanghai, then San Francisco, then New York, then Seoul Dynasty, London, Atlanta, Florida, Paris, Guangzhou Chargers, Los Angeles Gladiators, Dallas, Hangzhou, Vancouver, Toronto, Los Angeles Valiants, Houston, Chengdu Hunters, Washington, and Boston is in last place. In League of Legends, we're only going to be going over each league's quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, the playoffs, since Overwatch League, League of Legends is in the off season currently. Right now, we would be in MSI in that international tournament, but because of COVID, we are not, and it's kind of a long off season that's been interesting. In terms of League of Legends esports news, the biggest one has just been Doublelift leaving TL, and now he's back on TSM. That's really the biggest trade so far. Other than that, there's been other kind of small trades and people leaving in other organizations. But it's also an interesting time for Korea because next year they're supposed to be franchising. So with that out of the way, in LPL, the quarterfinals was Team Top Esports versus Invictus Gaming. Top Esports won 3-1. And then Fun Plus Phoenix versus JD Gaming. JD Gaming won 3-0 Fun Plus Phoenix. That's hilarious because they were the contenders for the last 2 years at World. They won both. In semifinals, we have Fun Plus Phoenix versus Invictus. And Fun Plus Phoenix won and beat Invictus 3-0. And in the finals, we had JD Gaming versus Top Esports, and JD Gaming won. So congratulations to JD Gaming. In the LCK, in the quarterfinals, we had Damwon versus Dragon X. Dragon X won 3-2. Then we had in the semifinals, we had Dragon X versus T1, or SKT1, they rebranded. T1 won 3-1, and in the finals we had T1 versus Gen G. T1 3-0 them in the finals. In Europe, we have in the quarterfinals we had Origins versus G2. G2 won 3-1. Then semifinals, G2 versus Mad Lions. G2 won 3-1, and then Fnatic. In the finals, we had Fnatic versus G2, and G2 3-0 them. In the LCS, which is North America, in the quarterfinals, we had Cloud9 versus Evil Geniuses. Cloud9 won Evil Geniuses 3-1. FlyQuest versus TSM. FlyQuest won 3-2. Semifinals, then we had Evil Geniuses versus FlyQuest. FlyQuest won 3-1. And then in the finals, we had Cloud9, which 3-0'd FlyQuest. And with that out of the way, that's esports. So currently, League of Legends is now in the off season. They're done until probably July, June-ish, I would say. And it's just the Overwatch League. For games that have been released over the past couple weeks, most notably Legends of Runeterra came out. Riot's card game came out on PC, iOS, and Android. Then we had Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 Remastered Campaign came out on Xbox One and PC. Then we had Street of Rage 4 come out on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC. For May, some things you have to look forward to. Not a whole lot of stuff in May. May's kind of a slow month, I would say. We have Arcade Spirit that came out, Zombie Army 4, Frozen Streets, John Wick Hex, Popular Zeros, Someday You'll Return, Infinite Beyond the Mind, Lonely Mountain Downhill, Sonic at the Olympic Games for mobile, Void Blasters, Wavered Rockets, Before We Leave, Super Smash, Tonight We Riot, Star Wars Episode 1, Racer, I don't know what that is, Virtual Verse, Deep Rocket, Super Mega Baseball, Best Friends Forever. It's kind of slow. We don't have a whole lot of good stuff coming out until really later this month, where you have the Minecraft Dungeons, which is supposed to be released. You have Saints Row the Third Remastered, it's supposed to be released. The Bioshock and Borderlands games are porting to the Switch. XCOM 2, which is also being ported to Switch, and the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, the remake of Xenoblade Chronicles, also comes out for the Switch. So, and the Elder Scrolls Online new expansion also comes out at the end of May. So those are the kind of things to look forward to at the end of this month. So let's get into the news, and we have a lot of kind of cool stuff. Some cool stuff firstly was around EA I want to talk about. So EA said that all their games that are currently for this generation, or not all of them, but the ones that are coming out, you'll have a free update to it when you go on to the next generation. So that means, I believe, like it'll be pretty obvious, but like Apex will be ported over. So any game that you buy on your current generation console between like right now will be updated, and you'll get a free update with the next generation console, which is nice to see. Xbox did the same thing. We'll talk about that a little bit later, because Xbox had a lot of stuff to talk about. Another thing that EA came out with this week was that they're franchising Star Wars Fallen Order. It was a great game. I actually really did enjoy it. It was a really good Star Wars game. It had a free update within the past couple weeks, which was really cool. And then they decided that there's more on the way from an IGN article. So that's really nice to see. More EA news. Apex Legends 5th season started with a new character that came out. That's really cool. And then on the news of Star Wars, we have a release date for Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. It was the Lego Star Wars game with everything in it. That's supposed to be released in October. And I also have a cool little Star Wars talk coming probably either next week or the week after that, where I recorded my raw thoughts on the last Star Wars movie, which I think will be very interesting for you guys to hear, especially now that that's settled down over the past couple months, as well as my thoughts on Star Wars, the Clone Wars finale, and all that. So look forward to a Star Wars episode, and look forward to a Valorant episode as well. So what else is coming up with the news? We have a new MK11 Fighters Pack that just got announced. This was actually really cool to see, because in one of my classes, one of my teachers works for NetherRealm, and he had the man who deals with the community come on, and it was very interesting to hear them talk and get information from them. I learned a lot, just how it's announced and how they saw feedback from this. So it was really cool just to hear their thoughts on it. They didn't reveal anything like super cool, inside trading, anything like that. I don't expect them to, but just their knowledge and their thought process on the subjects is just cool in general. On another side note, we're moving on. Cyberpunk, some Cyberpunk stuff came out this week. They talked about how you can have gender customization. So they're adding multiple genders. So you could be transgender, male, female, you can customize your genitals in any way you want, which is cool. I hope my friend kind of summarized it best, Where if they're putting in that feature in there just to have it, that's kind of sad, and he's not too excited about that. But if they're doing that just to and it has some sort of story meaning or affects the story in some way, then that's really cool, and that's how I hope they tackle it, because Cyberpunk's looking up to be a really stacked game. There's a list of just like how many explicit adult content is in the game I have right here. We'll go over that probably in a later episode. It's running out of time, and this one's gonna run kind of long. But I know it's got like an 18 plus rating in Brazil, so Cyberpunk's looking to be stacked. What else came out this week? Summer Games was announced to replace E3. IGN and Kotaku are all doing kind of these things where over the summer they're just gonna release game announcements rather than how they're doing it with just E3 in this month, because this month we're being E3 and we are being Games Developers Conference, GDC. So look forward to talk about that. That's just small things I want to mention. Other than that, we have a new Assassin's Creed game was announced, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which, Assassin's Creed died for me a long time ago, and I didn't really like these new installments at all. But if you're looking forward to that, look forward to that. And then finally, to wrap up the news, Xbox had their own little conference where they were going to show off gameplay with quotes. I'm air quoting. Really, we didn't see any games that we were looking forward to, really exclusives. They were all not first party titles. They were all made by other developers. So what did they show off at the Xbox live stream? Well, they showed off firstly Yakuza, a new Yakuza game, Like a Dragon. So that's kind of cool to see that come out. They showed off a new vampire game. So Vampire 2, they announced that. That's kind of cool. Then they had other small titles like The Medium, a psychological horror game, The Ascent, a co-op top-down action RPG in a cyberpunk world, of course. Second Extinction, mutated dinosaurs have taken over the planet, and this Second Extinction player will fight them back to retake the globe, so you're fighting dinosaurs. Scorn, another first-person like horror adventure game. Scarlet Nexus, it's a kind of anime type of game where you use psychokinetic powers to fight enemies. Then Madden NFL 21, Dirt 5, a racing game, Chorus, which is like a space simulator, flying shooter, coming out. Then they have Call of the Sea, a first-person puzzle game. Then we had Bright Memory Infinite, which is like a first-person shooter with like swords and shit. Looks kind of cool. And then lastly, they just showed off some more Valhalla gameplay, or just like kind of pre-rendered cutscenes, which I guess is cool if you're really hyped for Assassin's Creed. But no Halo, no Forza, no Gears of War, anything like that. They just said that this would be from other studios. So now that Xbox has kind of started it, we'll have to see what the other ones have in play. We're gonna have to see what Sony has to say. I know they said that Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us have come out really soon. There's so much to talk about, but the show's running on kind of long, so you gotta look forward to that. And I know Nintendo canceled their June Direct, but they probably have a lot of cool things in the work, like Breath of the Wilds 2. So anyway, with that being concluded, let's get into our talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I said I would get this show to you as soon as possible, take a minute to compose all my thoughts, and this week we are talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, I'm a big fan of the OG Final Fantasy VII, and it was interesting to play this game. Overall, it was a great game, and a win for Square. So on that note, let's talk about non-spoiler story aspects. The game follows our protagonist, Cloud Strife, an ex-soldier of Shinra who is hired by eco-terrorist organization called Avalanche. Avalanche is tasked with blowing up one of Shinra's Mako reactors, a power plant controlled by the Shinra Electric Company. They control the industrial city of Midgard and are sucking the life force from the planet. That's overall the gist of the summary of my own summary of the story. But of course, it doesn't just stop there with Shinra, and the journey continues afterwards. So that's basically a summary of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And what I want to say, and what you really have to understand about this remake compared to the original, is that in the original, the Midgard section only takes place, it's about 8 hours of the game, maybe less. It's kind of the first section of the game. And then you go off and you explore the world. However, in this game, Final Fantasy VII Remake only takes place in Midgard. So the story is a lot more fleshed out than the original game. And it adds a lot of background not only to the world but to the characters. So those are the non-spoiler aspects we're going to be talking about. And then later on in this talk, we'll talk about spoiler aspects. So the first character that I want to talk about is Cloud. In the original, we saw him go through a journey of zero to hero, but we never really got a sense of who he was as a person other than what he really wanted. I guess we got a sense, but not really a depth level personality. And in this game, they really accomplished that. Through this game, you see Cloud at the beginning who's just doing a job. All he wants is money. He's a mercenary. All he cares about is the money. He'll do the job for whatever the price. And he's an asshole to the crew. He doesn't really appreciate what they're trying to do for him. But then later on, when you get to the end of the game, you can see that now he actually has feelings for these guys. He's broken out a little. He's come out a little bit out of his shell. He actually, cares about him, wants to protect him and help him out. So Cloud's the first big character that really got fleshed out in this game. The second one would be Barrett for me. Barrett, in the original, he's just, a lovable fat dude who, yes, he was loud in the original, and he cared about the planet. And then we get a little, later on, after you leave Midgard, you get a little story with him in the underneath the basis of the Golden Saucer, I believe, in the original. But, of course, again, after that, you don't really learn much about his character. You don't really know what motivates him and drives him. But in this game, you can obviously see how much he cares about the planet, where he's preaching to not only you, the player, but the other player characters, just how much this matters to him, and what really drives him and why he wants to save the planet is for his daughter. His daughter's there in the original, but she's kind of forgotten after a while. Once you leave the city, Barrett just doesn't, he kind of forgets about his daughter. But in this game, you can see that he wants to leave the city. He has to go on this quest for his daughter, and they really emphasize that. So the cast overall, them really flushing them out, those are the two big ones for me. Were great story aspects, and I can't to see what they're gonna do with these characters. Other characters that also really got fleshed out in this remake are Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. It was actually amazing how well Square tackled these characters as a whole for me. Jessie, for instance, she gets more screen time than in the original. In the original, Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge were just there for really the first mission, and then they were gone. Just out of sight, out of mind gone. They really didn't have an impact on the story at all, or any real value to the player in the original. But in this game, you get to explore so much about him. You get to explore how Jessie, she used to be an actress, and now her father got Mako poisoning in a power plant. So now we see that she has motivation for what she's doing. In the original, that wasn't there. We get to see how Biggs used to work in an orphanage, and how Wedge gets cats, or likes cats. I may be mixing those two up, but those are staple Final Fantasy characters in general. So just seeing those characters fleshed out in their backstory is a very welcoming. Those are the aspects that I really enjoyed about the story, and then that's kind of where I have to stop without going into spoiler territory, because a lot of things that changed in this game also relate to the original, and we're gonna stop there for spoilers content. But if you want to hear that talk, that's gonna be later on in this episode. So now let's move on to gameplay and systems. Gameplay wise, it runs really smooth. It provides a good gameplay loop, just like how you expect from a JRPG, and it's very similar to Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy 15. So if you like those games from Square, or you've seen them and you see how they play, that's pretty much how generally how Final Fantasy 7 Remake plays. Now my problem shows up with the combat, and I have a lot of issues with the combat. The combat can be summarized like this. When it works, it's really fun and it succeeds on a brand new basis. But when it fails, it sucks to play against. And it can really hurt the experience overall. So my first issue with the combat is the camera. In the combat, you're fighting like 5 or 6 multiple enemies, and the camera is really, really zoomed. I got used to this as I played the game more and more, and when I got to the end game, I was pretty much fine with it. But starting off, the camera, I think, just needed to come out a little bit more. The FOV was too tight on Cloud, where you couldn't see anything. If an enemy was attacking you from behind, you could not see that enemy, and there's no warning whatsoever. And the game makes you fight a lot of large groups of enemies and very big enemies. So the camera is always an issue. And I would say all Square games, even in Kingdom Hearts and in Final Fantasy 15, the camera is an issue. It's very hard to get a camera right in video games. So going off that, we come to my second problem with the combat, which is animations. So animations, they have to be done right. There's a term in gaming called animation canceling, and what it means is that when I'm locked into one animation, I can cancel it with another, so I can end that animation earlier. The prime example of this would be Dark Souls, for instance. No matter what attack or movement you do, the roll animation and rolling takes priority. So if I start swinging, I can roll really quickly, and then I can dodge that attack. In this game, that's not how it works, and I wish they fleshed that out a little bit more, because early on it feels really weird when you're in an attack animation and the enemy's charging up a super big move and you can't roll out of the way, or you can't go into your block stance because you're in the middle of attack animation, and then you get hit by it, and then maybe you get punished for it. Now I don't know if this is because they wanted the game to feel more turn-basedy, where once you're locked into an animation, you're locked into that for life. But it just felt like a huge drawback and when they're trying to make this game kind of a more hack and slash, updated kind of turn-based game. I think at that point in the game, just because of those animations and the blocking features, I would like to see the game in just straight up turn-based. I know there's a classic turn-based mode that you can turn on, but I would just like to see it probably just full turn-based, kind of like how what Persona does, because you can't really have it both ways. And even though, again, the combat feels really good, when these aspects are shown and you feel them, it just feels bad. And it leads to the biggest problem out of the combat, which is not just those things. Those things are kind of small, tiny things for me, but the biggest thing is the AI. The AI is really kind of bad in this game. Sometimes they just won't attack at all. They take forever to stack the ATB gauge, which is what you need to use spells and abilities in combat, and they take forever compared to the player character. So it's kind of in this weird, really weird realm. And also the enemy AI will only aggro the player character. So if you're playing as Cloud, it will only attack Cloud. It won't really attack the other two characters. So this means that you can do a weird kind of aggro loop where you could just switch characters, and the mod will consistently switch aggro on whoever you are controlling. But then you have to control these characters in order to stack their ATB gauge, really fast and use abilities and spells. So it's really weird. And if you're not playing as them, then they kind of just don't do anything. Like, you have to command them to use certain spells, which is weird from a Square game coming from Kingdom Hearts, where you can just use, like, you can program in the menu, Donald only use heal, Goofy only use this ability. You can set their priorities. And in this game, you can't, and the AI just kind of acts really wonky. And I hope those are kind of combat systems that they improve on later on. On a more systematic side of the game, we have the materia system, which I think they've done a fantastic job updating. The materia system is one of those systems that did not age well, I think, in the original Final Fantasy, if you go back and play it today. But now that it's been improved upon a lot, it's really nice to see it work, essentially. What I'm interested to see is how can that carry over into the next part of the game. But we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. So the next big aspect of the game is presentation. And the presentation of the game is honestly fantastic. It's probably my favorite part of the game overall. They really did a good job fleshing out this world and making it feel like Midgard. When I played the original game back in like 2017, I got the vibes of a steampunk city that was trashed, and people weren't very happy living there. It was terrible, and it just wasn't a good environment. It was filled with crime, and no one cared about down there. But up on top, in the higher plates, it was fantastic. It was nice. People were chilling. They were, smoking. They were drinking. They were shopping, and they were having a good old time. Now, this game really adds emphasis on that. I think one of the best parts of the world is just the environments and how they did it. But it's also kind of a bad part in a different way. But I'll get to that in a little bit. So in this world, the levels themselves are really well designed, where you can see, like, they actually thought about, like, okay, how do you make trash and steampunky trash, and then you make it into like a shop. So they have, like, merchants on the side selling like tons of junk, and then they have neon signs to make it more steampunky and old places. The prime example of this is when you get to Wall Market. Wall Market is exactly what you think it would be, with the honeybee inn, with the Dawn's Palace, and just like all the other kind of small corners and hallways. It just really lives up to the world of Midgard, and you actually feel like you're in the city. Now the bad part is outside of the actual level that's designed, it looks terrible. And this I just blame on the actual PS4 or PS5's hardware, where some areas would just get kind of laggy. They would like the background art just looked like a 2D photo, even like the overhead map, and you just look up and it just looks really bad to see Midgard just like kind of 2D photo out in the background. You could tell like what was the level and what wasn't the level, and it's very weird design. I blame that not really on the designers themselves, but on the system. I don't think if this game was on a PC, I think they could get away with probably, or maybe time is also a issue. But if it was on PC, it probably would look a lot better. The other presentation, And then for also presentation, there are just small things as well. Like you could see the materia in the sword. The character models were very smooth. The abilities and particles were really cool. It's so they really did a fantastic job on presentation. So now let's move on to story. And this is your spoiler warning. So if you care about the game, haven't played about the game yet, I know I normally don't do this, but this is the point where spoilers matter. So the game overall, starting now. So the game overall, fantastic. I think they knocked it out of the park. However, the game, even though it got really flushed out, there are just parts of it that just kind of felt like, why am I doing this? It's just like extra side story, really a lot of filler content in the game. Some of that would be the train park scene, or when you're going through the train graveyard, and that scene, that chapter, really kind of filler in the game. And the game sees a lot of that. The part where you're going to Wall Market, or you're going back to Sector 7 after the fall, one of the best chapters, and usually you just have to, and then Eris tells you, oh, I'm going through this secret route, and you go through the secret route in the original game, and then you get there and you see Tifa going back to Wall Market, so you have to go to Wall Market to rescue her. But in this game, you have to, like, when you go through that route, there's a lot of, like, extra side puzzle shit that you have to do that I just wish wasn't there. Because when you have to replay that shit on hard mode, if you're going through all the achievements, like I was, it gets really tiring. So there's a lot of filler within the story. The story overall plays exactly how I would like it to play from the original Final Fantasy VII. Like, it is a remake. Like, every iconic moment that you thought would be in the game is still there, which is really good that they didn't skip over that. And of course, with more added on top of that, and again, more filler, which is bad. So the story really is a completion story. It's 35 hours. It took me like 35 hours to complete. So you will definitely get your money's worth. Now, the two biggest story impacts that I have with, and technically three, and the end is the ending, which has a lot of debate, which we will talk about, and Sephiroth, which someone pointed out to me, which is very interesting, and of course, the Force Ghost, or the Dementors that are flying around, which kind of ties into the ending. All three of these are kind of the same. So let's start with Sephiroth. Sephiroth is a fantastic character, especially in the original games. He was the threat, he was the problem. He was the mysterious one who's trying to reset the world and use the black materia. He was the problem. And him and Cloud had a relationship. But the problem is, you didn't know Sephiroth. Sephiroth wasn't really the main antagonist until really midway through the game, I would say, of OG Final Fantasy VII. The main antagonist of Midgard was Shinra, and yet throughout this game, Sephiroth just kind of shows up, and it just kind of feels out of place. And from what reviews that I've heard, this game is kind of designed in a way where, if you don't know what happened in the original Final Fantasy VII, it's really hard to understand what's kind of going on in this game overall. The game kind of expects you to know what happened in the original and how the original played out for this game to do its thing. And I think that's kind of bad overall. It's cool, because now it feels like the game's remade for those people who played the original. But if I never played the original, it would be very kind of confusing, some of the things, and I feel like I would miss a lot. Sephiroth just being one of those things, like, just consistently he's there, and he's there, and he's there. It's weird how they do this now with villains. Like, Vader in the original Star Wars, it was looking at, like, a comment, he had, like, 8 minutes of total screen time, and Sephiroth kind of appears, like, every other chapter. So it's weird to see him there. So now let's talk about the Force Ghosts. So the Force Ghosts are they've had a lot of discussion about them. I honestly don't really know what to think about them. Just that they're plot devices for this game. They're meant to be there for this game and this game only. I don't know if they're really there to set up this game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then they're gonna kind of not use them for the other games that are supposed to come out. But that's what their main purpose is. The theory that I really like about the ghosts that I heard about was that they were there to make sure Destiny was on track, make sure that this game kind of played out exactly the way that the original does, which it doesn't. And that the reason why Sephiroth is now paying so much attention to Cloud is because in the original timeline, his plan failed. And I kind of like that idea. It makes more sense for this game, but then I kind of don't like it at the same time, because now that kind of goes into the last chapter. So the last chapter really feels like Kingdom Hearts to me, and it was a huge throw off. How I wanted to see the game, and this chapter is like the ending has so much debate around it, like so much debate. How I would like to see the game was that our heroes, the crew, Barrett, Bard, Eris, Tifa, all of them, Red, 13, they all finished the game. Or they escaped the Shinra headquarters, and then they had to flee the city, or maybe like they realized that there's something that Sephiroth was still out there. That's how that's the original intent. Like, I wish they kind of stuck with the original a little bit more, and that's why they left the city. They left the city because when they got to Shinra, they saw Sephiroth's sword in the Shinra president, and he had to leave. So, or they had to leave, and they wanted to, go find Sephiroth and find out the truth and what the main threat was. But in this game, it kind of goes like after that, it still does that, but it goes into this weird like Final Fantasy route where you get to the crossroads of Destiny or something like that, I believe it was called, and they're like, there's no turning back, and they go through this portal and they're fighting these force ghosts, a million of them, which are essentially heartless, and they form into multiple aspects, which is a cool thing about. They released a book recently, interview. It's like a player guide, and it's like had interviews in it on how like those children are the three like mini bosses at the end of the game before the final boss, are the Avid children from the movie, which was really kind of cool. But overall, it's really kind of weird, and we're pressed for time, so I'm gonna speed this up a little bit more, and just go into the final boss. So after you defeat the big Heartless thing, which felt really Kingdom Heartless, you have the Sephiroth boss fight, which doesn't feel good at all, because I feel like that boss fight would have, there's only one fight with Sephiroth in the original Final Fantasy VII, and that's the final boss at the end of the game. So having this fight makes sense. Like, they need to end this game because they decided to go in this weird installment path, but just having that fight felt really kind of bad. I like the Gianova fight they added. In fact, a cool fight like that probably should have been the final fight. I would have been cool with that. But having Sephiroth as the final fight felt really weird. So, the story overall in the ending is, again, I'm not really going to give my take on it because I think it was there to end this story and set up. I'm not going to dive into like how technical it can be, whether like now this timeline is different from the original Final Fantasy timeline and all those theories that have gone on, but I'm very interested to see what's next for the game. The interview that came out with the player guide added a lot of light to characters and a lot of different things, but really what I'm going to say is that when you play this game for yourself, or if you watch the ending, take it your own way. I really don't think it can really be dissected as much as people think it can, in that it's really just an ending to set up the next couple games. And this leads into probably the biggest problem overall with the remakes is what is Square going to do with the next games? That's the problem. This remake as itself was really top quality, high quality. It was perfect. I loved it. It was fantastic. But how is that going to transition into Final Fantasy Remake 2, Final Fantasy Remake 3? How many are we going to have to wait? How many are we going to get? Because that wasn't the full Final Fantasy. So if we're getting another 35 experience or 35-hour experience in the next Final Fantasy episode remake, and this game took forever to make, and we know how long Square takes to make games. Kingdom Hearts got like delayed multiple times, so did Final Fantasy 15. It's a big problem. Like, I don't know what they're gonna go with it or what they're gonna do. There hasn't been any news about it, and I don't even know if they have plans in the work, and I would like to see plans in the work, because this episodic thing with this ending and how they decide to end this game is the overall biggest concern for the Final Fantasy remake. If you want this game as a standalone project or standalone game, I think it's fantastic. Go ahead, get it. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, and I'm thinking about the grand scheme of things and how long it takes to develop games, that's what's really concerning. So if I had to rate this game, give it a score, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, honestly, I'll give it like an 8. It's pretty solid. I liked it a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing it. It lived up to its predecessor, and that's overall what made me happy. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of It's Not a Sport. This is your host, Salty Waffles. If you want to listen to our previous shows, they are all up on our YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our website, itsnotasport.com. Follow us on our Instagram, It's Not a Sport to You. And if you have anything you want me to discuss, feel free to reach out on our social media or email us on our website. Everything's up on there. I hope you're having a wonderful climb. And this has been your host, signing off.